Having spent upwards of $60 million, eventually they called it quits because the tech wasn't ready. And that was, by all accounts, a spectacular failure. Now I think we're finally ready to take on process level automation, figuring out the right balance of humans and AI.
From your history of where this journey started from long back till now,
Mhm.
walk us through the time lapse of various different things that the healthcare industry has tried to do that have worked well, that have showed impact, but not might not be the new exciting emerging things like generative AI from
Mhm.
even 5, 7 years ago.
Yeah, actually, funny you should mention that, Milan. So, if you remember the IBM Watson days
Mhm.
back from 2011 or so, and I think you and I were both at Deloitte, back then. As soon as a good friend of ours, Manoj Saxena, was the first general manager for IBM Watson, and he coined this term that we're putting Watson to work. So, if you recall, Watson had famously won Jeopardy, and then immediately IBM rushed to production and said, "Hey, let's put Watson to work and cure cancer." Was the moonshot that they started with. And MD Anderson famously was their design partner for going and doing just that. And that was, by all accounts, a spectacular failure. And this is public knowledge, so I'm not revealing anything that's confidential to the client. But I think having spent upwards of $60 million, I think eventually they called it quits because the tech wasn't ready. The user adoption and the physicians, oncologists that were using it weren't ready to use it. But what I think was not as well documented was that there were a number of smaller, more tactical things that they were able to do. So, for example, sort of automating the claim submission process, filling in the missing data in claim submissions when payers responded to MD Anderson and said, we need additional clinical documentation. How do we extract that from the EMR and make it a part of the claim and then submit it and then anticipate when that question is going to come from payer and then proactively provide that as appropriate. This was going back in 2011, 12, 13. And those initiatives have continued to expand on at MD Anderson and others. So the journey has been that where the tech was ready to be used and adapted for specific task level automation. This was from 10 years ago, and then if you go back even a decade earlier, robotic process automation, which kind of was more sort of the poor man's version of AI back then, was doing just that, right? So it was filling in, forms on a web app or, doing data entry and pushing the next button on a workflow. And then the progression from there to more anticipatory, automation at a task level, I think was kind of the progress. And now I think we're finally, ready to take on process level automation and eventually enterprise level automation, which we're not quite there yet. But I think the process level automation is well underway. There's work to do, I think, in how we're approaching it. But in terms of the maturity of the technology, obviously, taking on an entire process and figuring out the right balance of humans and AI, I think that's kind of where the industry is today.